Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Happily Never After. I'm your host, Kate.
And I'm Jay. How you doing?
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me again, Jay. We've got a pretty exciting topic. I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit in the past, but why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners what we've encountered as widows and widowers in the widowhood experience?
Well, what we did was we're looking at kind of s- adding on to what we talked about a couple of episodes before. Previously, we talked about how you lose your friend circle when your spouse dies. Things change. Now we're discussing how to find a new group of friends, how to find your particular tribe. It's interesting because when 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 it happened to me, I realized that my tribe of people were not anyone that I normally gravitated to.
Mm.
It ended up becoming a group of people that understood what I was going through. They had similar circumstances.
So, like support group-esque, but not support group.
You know what? I didn't really personally the whole support group thing. I tried it, and
But I didn't enjoy it either. Same.
yeah,
Like,
it's interesting feeling. But when it becomes organic, for instance, our relationship was purely organic. It was
yours and
based
mine.
off it was based off the fact that both of us are making a conscious effort to make moves to do things different than what our worlds were prior to losing our spouse.
And it
So
wasn't by choice. Like, we were
no,
forced into this momentum, this trajectory, and we just happened to cross paths, much like the eclipse that happened not too long ago. We kind of covered up eclipsed one another and found a relationship. I'm not sure how it is for you or how it was for you, but I've always struggled to make friends, to make genuine connections. I'm incredibly extrovertive, and connecting with people and being friendly or friends with people was never a struggle with for me. Ask my mother, and she will tell you when we would go on family vacations, it's making friends with the random little kid in the pool or at the playground, and always was really good at finding friendly circles. But genuine friends, I've always struggled to feel super connected to. And then you add the isolative factor of that erosion of friend circle that comes with losing a spouse. And now here I am just sitting at home going, I don't know how to make friends as an adult. And you're putting yourself out in new experiences and situations. And my situation's even more unique because I got married really young. It was basically like I was 23, 24 years old. I was a single mom when I got married. So it's not like I was out doing the college partying scene and living on my own and having those social experiences. I went basically from being a teenager to being a married adult in a very short amount of time and having no young adulthood to sow my wild oats in. And that's really when you learn to make formative friendships and develop social circles. I didn't have that. So here I am, 35 years old, with a very small group of friends going, how do I make friends? Can
right.
someone teach me how to make friends? I feel like I have to go back to kindergarten and like figure that out.
Get your
Someone
blocks
help, I
on.
need an
You
adultier
know?
adult.
Well, you know what? It's what's interesting is my situation is quite opposite to yours because see, I am the type of person like I'm a social butterfly. And, you know, but then I realized also in my social butterfly, I was kind of what I call a people pleaser.
Mm,
I wanted to make
hashtag
sure,
trauma response.
yeah, I wanted to really make sure that, hey, people like me, that type of thing.
You needed
And
that, you know,
I would, I would,
approval.
I would morph myself to fit in. Plus, again, I was in a situation where I went from being in one environment to going to another environment. When I went to that new environment, what I didn't realize was that friendships were not genuine unless you
Mm,
were from the environment.
mm,
Friendships were very surface. And when I lost my wife, I noticed that in a hard way. So it made it difficult for me to want to actually find more friends because I had felt like I had been so put into a different situation. I and I'm putting the word mistreated in air quotes
yeah.
because that was the feeling at the time, you know. But it's what we do. And my whole thing is understanding that there is a there's a need to actually have that break when when your when your life partner passes away and when you are going through changes, then you have to understand that the reason why the friends group leaves is because it is forcing you to find a new group of people that are conducive to your new world.
And I think that part of my struggle initially was because I didn't, and still to a degree, don't know how to make real friendships. And the friendships I did have were couples friends. And then that was completely not even just eroded, because eroded feels like slow over time, but this was just a complete upheaval, and now you're left isolated, and then it's finding people who accept your authentic self because you're not people pleasing and masking, and so it's even harder and takes even longer, and it's like doing a couch to 5K, like it's a process. And just a side note, I have to yell at our producer Eric because he pointed out how often I say the word like, and every time I say it now I'm like, oh, like I just even now wanted to be like, and then take a breath. So, Eric, I know you're listening. Thank you for ruining my life. I can't brain right now because I keep thinking about how often I'm saying the word like. So, for all of our listeners out there, knowing that we're doing this, we're helping people, but we're also human and subject to neurospiciness and idiosyncrasies and personality quirks, and that goes into how you make friends, right? It's a
That
matter
does.
of like I said, finding those people, like I said, Jesus, finding those people who really accept you authentically and not caring about the people who don't. And that's hard when you're not in the widowhood experience, when you're not going through trauma, when you're not healing generational wounds or childhood abuse or whatever the instance is that puts you on that new trajectory. That's hard enough. And then you add in the facets, all the other components of widowhood. And the fact that our, experiences are basically diametrically opposed. You were the college kid immersed in social situations, really well versed at making friends, people pleasing or otherwise. I was a social kid, but how and who I hung out with in high school and the first years living at home after high school were very much dictated by my family social circle and my older sibling who was only a couple years, and our house was the party house. So any of the friends were ripple effects in the pond, secondary, tertiary relations of people. And it was just very incestuous, for lack of a better word. And now to go out into the world and have to drum up out of thin air, just pull out social behaviors and manifest friendships out of nothing is a wild skill set I didn't know I was ill equipped at. I've always been the report card kid, talks too much of a social butterfly, very extroverted. And I also found out that that is a people pleasing because I need validation. And that becomes further amplified when you're widowed because you're feeling so isolated, so alone that you need to know there's love, affection, connection, support. So, to a degree, I almost amplified my people pleasing. So, making sure I felt connections, but I was doing it maladaptively, hanging out at bars, drinking too much, being the class clown, being the center of attention. That's how I got people to like me. That's how I made some friendships. You end up making some poor choices like that, right? We're all human. And I'm very transparent that I am not perfect and have made some poor choices. But would I go back and do it differently? No, because I wouldn't have fostered or garnished the learning that I have now to be able to tell other people, I made some poor choices, so please don't make those choices. Here's how you avoid that.
And the reality is you have to bump your head. You have
Yes.
to stub your toe because a part of the process are the mistakes that are being made. You learn through that. These are the people I don't want to be associated with. This is who I want to be associated with. And it's also kind of a hybrid of what you knew in the past
Mm,
pre-spouse and now what you are learning post-spouse. And a lot of the things that you're learning post-spouse are the fact that you don't have a buffer. You don't have a defense system.
mm.
You
Like when
don't
you're
have
bowling,
anyone to
but
help
the
you out.
bumper's up. You don't have the
And
bumper.
you have to go into this yourself. And so in going into it yourself, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to see, mind you, you are going to gravitate to people who you who you think are sympathetic to your circumstance.
I
But
gravitated towards people who were familiar, who were
right,
comfortable, who were safe. And because of my relationship building skill coming from trauma responses as a kid, as a young adult, and then that feeling of loss, in addition to the first year and a half of most of my relationships with people in a social context were detrimental, if anything. But you're right, it is a trial
yeah,
by fire. You've got to walk on the coals. It's funny, I was talking with a friend last night about death, grief, and all of that stuff. He lost both of his parents, his mom a while back, and his dad fairly recently, and he was struggling. And I know this is, we talk about loss of a spouse, but there was such a relatability in his grief experience for what I personally went through, where he was trying to figure out which stage of grief he was in. And I was listening to him talk and talking him off a ledge, so to speak, about where he had landed. And it dawned on me. I was like, there aren't stages of grief, there's phases of grief. And that first phase is like survival. And, he was talking about how the fog had started to lift and he wasn't in any of that, and how he was finding himself again and going out. And he's like, I'm going to start doing X, Y, and Z, all the things that fill his cup. And I was like, first of all, super proud of you. Second of all, mastered phase one. You've now leveled up into phase two of grief. So we have to level up. And it was such an awareness for me that as I am talking to him, I self-reflected and I was like, oh, that's what that was, as I'm making these friendships that were necessary at the time, not the best choice for me, but served a purpose in learning, where I went, that was a phase in grief that I had to go through to get to this phase of being able to have healthy social circles and be self-fulfilling, to date myself, fill my own cup, love myself in my imperfections, and now have healthy friendships, romantic relationships, and the like.
true, true. Well, you know what? I wanted to kind of go back for a second because what is interesting is that you there are not there are not stages of grief for the griever. There are stages of grief for people that are going through a circumstance and they are about to die. For the griever, I think it's more about exactly what you said, phases, because you go through a new process, you 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 trans you transform yourself to becoming a new person. And that's where you start to meet your new tribe, your new group of people. You see, what is
Yeah.
interesting is that you will never find familiar relationships in your old group unless someone in that group has gone through something similar.
Mm,
You can form a bond at that point of understanding. But I remember when I was going through a situation and I went to I went to a bar to hang out with a friend of mine. And the friend of mine, we were both going through challenging situations. I had just lost my wife. He was in the middle of a really nasty divorce.
mm.
And we're talking, and he says to me, man, you know what? You're lucky. At least you ain't got to deal with that. You
Oof.
know, and and he didn't mean it,
Sure.
but he was so hurt by what he was going through. And you know, you end up gravitating towards people,
Misery loves
who hurt
company.
people, and you end up gravitating towards other hurt people, not
Hmm.
realizing that the pain is different or
Well,
the reasons
like
for the pain are different.
I
Therefore,
say, it's apples to oranges, but they live in the same produce department.
right,
Is we can go
right.
commiserate and have the sympathy and empathy for other people, and that's a really great entry point into forming relationships. But also, I feel like grief and trauma set us up in a different space because most people would have been really offended by that sentence or statement or sentiment. And certainly that's a whole other conversation about, what
Oh,
not
I
to say.
was at the time. You know,
Sure,
I'm
but you're
told,
able
you
to go
know.
back and reflect on it and go, you know what, he didn't mean it. And there's growth in that because you've developed a higher appreciation of your relationships with people. So finding that new tribe is like such a challenge because there's so many, like, again, the word like, damn it, Eric. There's so many layers of the onion that you have to peel back about your childhood traumas and your personal biases, and then your, immediacy of the loss and the trauma, and where your relationships were developing from, and not knowing how to find relationships, and then maladaptive behaviors. And you mix all that together in a really terrible tasting cake, and you're forced to go out and be social in a way that's uncomfortable. For me, I got an ADHD diagnosis shortly after Craig passed away, so that I'm managing medication schedules and neurodivergencies and how I connect with people, and feeling further removed from that. Having two small kids, making time to go have friends because I can make mom friends, but sometimes those are disingenuous for all the moms out there listening. We all know those mommy groups are very cliquey, and it's like watching Mean Girls, very
Yeah.
Desperate Housewives-y. I live in a condo complex that's I live a dead end street. Do you think I'm friendly with my neighbors? No, I've lived here 3 years and I don't know anybody's name because they all stay to themselves and I'm the only one with kids. But you would think that that would be a great way to foster community. We live in a pretty small town. We go to community events. Do I know a ton of people from town? No, I've lived in this town for 7 years. Who? I don't know. It's a struggle bus.
Well, here's the one thing that's interesting on top of that. You now become ultra cautious because there are so many vultures and snakes out there that will take advantage of your pain.
People who hold their hand out either for financial
Yep.
assistance or
Yep.
to just the
And now
kindness of our
and
heart because we want that empathy from other people.
right, because you feel that they're being genuine, but the reality is what they're doing is they're catering and pandering to your pain
To get a
for
desired result for
right,
themselves.
to get a financial result or to get a certain type of gain out of it, to get you to do things for
X, Y,
them,
or Z, and that leaves you
you
further
know,
depleted and defeated,
right.
and then
And
second guess yourself when it comes time to go make new social connections.
that's it. It's listen, the reality. Now, here's what's funny. That's my word. Listen, you
That, well,
know,
you have lots of words. I keep telling you that I'm going to make you a bumper sticker that says you ain't said nothing but a thing, or let me tell you something. And all of the people who are listening are going to go back to previous episodes and listen to both of us and be like, yep, she said like 167 times. And he said, let me tell you something 212 times. And I'm going to make us, matching team jackets for people who repeat the same phrase. So
hey, hey,
again, thank you, Eric, for ruining my life and making me painfully aware of that.
but you know what? Again, this is all part of the process.
It's real though.
Li-
This is the realness of our processing of our pain and of
Right.
our situation.
We're
What are
not
some of the ways
afraid.
that
We're not afraid to do this. See,
right.
what's interesting is, again, a part of creating a friend circle is realizing that you are going to find people who are going through phases. I was about to say stages, phases, just like you are.
Yep.
And they're now looking, their wings are expanding. And at the same time, your wings are expanding.
Yes. And you guys kind of lean on each other
Yes.
and like grow in that upward trajectory together.
So again, something like this podcast that we're doing, this is simply two people who are now not being afraid to become authentic.
Mm,
And, with that being the case, there are going to be some errors, there are going to be some mistakes. Listen, I'm telling the crowd right now, a big part of you finding your group means that you're going to have to take steps. And there are going to be stumbles. Like I said earlier, you are going to bump your head.
and you
You
have
are
to.
to run into those people who don't have your best interest at heart. You're going, part of this is you learning how to maneuver through that and how to understand what is genuine and what is not.
I think the other piece of awareness for me, especially last night talking with my friend, was it is very much like being a toddler or being reborn. You
Yes.
go through that pain of the loss, and that is quite literally traveling through the birth canal into your new life. And you come out on the other side completely nonverbal, non-mobile, inept, ineffable, like it's undescribable. And then you grow and you learn to stand and you're wobbly on your feet like a toddler learning to walk, and you stumble and you fall, but you have to navigate those playground sandbox sharing of your toys and who's nice and who's not and how to say please and thank you. And then you grow into elementary aged children again, and then you go through the reckless phase of making maladaptive choices and poor decisions, and then you come out on the other side more authentically yourself, but having relearned how to exist in the world, how to be a human. And it was a wild awareness for me to have that cerebral experience last night, to go like, it is a rebirth in a way that I hadn't thought about before. Lots of people say it's a rebirth or a transition, and you don't understand it until you go through it. But that making of friends comes from really relearning how to exist in the world. You become very childlike temporarily.
It's
So
funny because listening to how you talk about it, that verbal description, it is literally like you said, traveling through the birth canal. And then when you come out, you are you're at a phase where you don't know anything. I mean, you can't even pick your own head up. You know,
Yeah.
you are crapping in your pants constantly.
Yeah.
And
You need someone to hold your hand and keep you steady
yes,
while you walk.
yes. And what's interesting is then you start to enter each phase, which is again similar
You
to
go through those growing pains again.
right. You're gonna meet friends. You're gonna meet friends that you think are gonna be friends for life, but you
And
know
you're going to
what?
tell everyone, like, oh, it's different. They're not like
Right.
that. And people are going to call out the red flags. And
And now you're gonna have a an issue with them because they see something you don't.
then you're
And
going to be like, screw them. They're not supportive of
right,
me. They don't understand what I'm
right.
going through. And then you got to hang your head and go back to them with your tail between your legs when it goes sideways and be like, man, I didn't see that
Right.
coming. They're
You
all going to
know,
be like acting, you did it?
yeah, it's but again, it is interesting because in order to find a genuine friendship, in order to find your genuine tribe, you are going to have to go through
Yes.
different
You
areas.
have to
See,
learn what's not
this
right for you.
this is a journey. There is no end goal for
It's a
this,
marathon, not a sprint. Yep.
right? And along the way, you are going to find people who have gone through things just like you. And some people will be friends or people that you know that have had experiences. They may not have had the same type of experience that you've had,
Right.
but if you can understand that the pain that they have is genuine
Yes.
and
It can be adjacent. It doesn't have
it
to be
can
exact.
be. And again, you don't have to always have the exact same type of situation. Uh,
Sure.
my circumstance was I remember the issue in the bar. The guy was just so mad at what he was going through
Right.
that
You
you
also
know
have to find people who are in a
it
similar
right,
timeline to you or a similar processing because you're what, 7 years out? I'm
right,
3 years out, but we are at a very similar healing phase, I feel like. If you are, hanging out with people who are 3 days out when you're 7 years out, they're leaning on you as that like concrete pillar of support. And that's not to say that you can't help them and mentor them and guide them, because I'm so grateful for the people who are further along down the road who turned around and extended a hand and pulled
yes.
me up the mountain. But if you're looking for friends, it's not taking people under your wing and being an AA sponsor for other grief people. You can do that, and that's great. But that's not a friend. That is you feeling needed and validated and seeking external love and trying to replace that relationship. And that's not a friend.
Well,
Friends
you
are
know
mutually beneficial and reciprocal.
what is interesting about what you just said is you do now become the
The
mentor.
Sherpa of grief.
uh, Sherpa of now,
It is like climbing Mount Everest, and we become Sherpas.
but you know what? There are people who you remember when you first experienced your loss.
Mm,
It was a time period where you were absolutely alone. So
yes.
now you don't want someone else who has gone through the experience to have the immediate feelings of being alone.
Right.
So you want to mentor them and have conversations. What you have to understand, you have to
Show them
get
the love.
to understand that this 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 is this is a friendship, but this is not a friendship like how you had before your loss. This is a teacher. This is Goodwill Hunting. You
Yeah.
know,
Such a
yeah,
great reference and such a
that's
great
what
movie.
this is. This is
But you'll
I'm
have
teaching
those
you.
relationships and you'll have it in reverse. You'll have the teacher becomes the student type of situation, you
Yes.
know, a Patch Adams, if you will, if we're going to keep with the Robin Williams theme.
Right.
Um, you'll have that, and then you'll have co-commiserators, and then you'll have people who aren't in grief or aren't in loss, and you can find genuine, authentic connections with them. I recently made friends with someone in a completely new social setting, and we have both had trauma experiences, but they wouldn't classify themselves necessarily in grief and not in trauma, but they understand, and we can kind of like have that dark sense of humor and be really messed up individuals together. And it's nice to have someone to just be weird with, like be your authentic self with.
The reality is that's that's part of the whole learning to find your new group thing. You're going to, again, you're going to find people that you mesh with because of what you've gone through, because of what you're experiencing, because of different aspects. What is what is interesting is that a lot of people expect the new group that they find to be similar to the old group that they
Yeah.
lost. And the shock to the system is the fact that it'll be somebody totally different. I mean, hey, it's interesting because I think you and I talk about this all the time. Listen, I'm a black male, you're a white woman. Under normal situations, people would probably think, oh, they're one of those mixed couple relationships or whatever. No, we're just two people that genuinely like each other as friends. And, you know, and we and our realities are the fact that, you know what, we've been through things and we're now in the stage in our lives where we're not afraid to try to do these new things.
Yeah. And that comes from trauma and grief. But
Yes.
to your point, we float in completely different social circles. They're
Yes.
similar and parallel, but that's the thing about parallel lines is they don't generally
They
intersect.
don't cross.
Parallel lines don't
Right.
cross. We both, when our spouses passed, we both were in a place of relative affluence, right? Financial stability, good jobs, but we both come from poverty backgrounds. We're both from the, Northeast New England-ish area.
Right.
I don't know that I would call New Jersey New England, but
Well,
it's New England
New Jersey's not
adjacent.
part of New England, but
It
hey,
has a new
but
in it, so you're
put it
like,
this way,
second cousin twice removed, so it's
right?
close enough.
It's
But
three
we
hours
both
from
come from that
Connecticut, so
northeastern seaboard
here we go.
region initially, and you're in Texas now, but we have lots of similar. We grew up in poverty, we grew up in
Yes,
trauma, we
yes,
had, complicated parental
and
relationships,
we
we've
would
had
not have
similar
known these
loss
things.
experiences.
What's interesting, we would not have known these things if we hadn't have gone through our losses, and
That's exactly it. I think even with all of our similarities, had we been geographically in a place where we could have intersected, I don't think that you and I would have ever eclipsed
no,
each other unless we'd had that similar spousal loss experience. So the fact
exactly.
that we cross paths
It was
is very,
something else that allowed us
yeah.
to come together.
So
You know,
what are some of the ways besides, the universe putting me in front of you? What are some of the other ways that you found to be successful to expand your new tribe? Like, how are you finding people?
well, what I did was, honestly, there is kind of a what I kind of like to call a tentacle system, and it's almost like a spider web. You'll meet someone, and they'll say, you know what? Let me introduce you to this person, and
Mm,
then you go from there and there and there. For instance, I met my mentor and friend. our friend Tony
Mm.
Lynn.
Shout
I
out to
met
Tony
him
Lynch.
through another gentleman who runs an organization called Grief Tribe Men. His name is Mike, and Mike McClendon. We call him Mike MC. But Mike Mike reached out to me one day. I was just sending Facebook posts all over the place because I wanted to I wanted to be a a grief coach. I wanted to be that mentor for people, but I didn't know how to go about doing it. So I was initially just sending, posts and things like that all over the place. Well, Mike got in touch with me and we started talking. I I ended up I created my first podcast, which
Mm.
I had never done a podcast before, but he was one of my first guests. Then afterwards, he introduced me. He goes, you know what? Email this guy
I love
and
that.
you can talk to him. His name was Tony. And Tony goes, he was doing something called the Global Grief Network at that time.
Yep.
And so he invited me to be a speaker on this event. And
Love
I had
that.
explained to him that, obviously my insurance career, I spoke to hundreds of people, so I was fine with that.
Yeah.
What's new is the fact that I'm just putting my I'm getting my sea legs with understanding this grief thing, you know,
Mm.
and but Tony, he walked with me through the whole thing. So I was able to find connections there. Then over time, different Facebook groups, different organizations.
So for
Uh,
you, it started very much in like seeking professional development
yes,
and like
that for
throwing
me,
yourself
that's
into your
exactly what
work.
it was.
Yeah, throwing yourself
Because
into your work and alchemizing your pain into something productive, then fostered new relationships, which then grew beyond professional into friend. That's what that sounds like, right?
that's that's what happened for me.
I did
Because
something similar, but I started dating and then found that I didn't want to be romantic with these people. And actually, one of my good friends post law, I found on Facebook dating, because Facebook dating has a setting where you can find friends. And we ended up, crossing paths that way and both going, wow, Facebook dating is like rummage sale for men. Um,
wow, that
most of them. I will say my current partner, he and I met on Facebook dating, and it was very much like, playing the lottery. You got to scratch a lot of tickets, and they're all
yeah.
losers before you find a winner. So I am lucky enough to have found a big cash winner. I'm very fortunate that Facebook dating played out like that. So, but it's not that way for other people. And however you find that entry point into social interactions, whether it be professional, whether it be initially trying to be romantic and then realizing that dating sucks in general. For some people, it's like my friend who I was talking to last night. He is a former actor and theater performer. So he started going out to karaoke night at bars and he's not drinking, which I'm like, love that for you. No shame to anyone who is drinking. But as someone who is currently on the sobriety journey, like I understand how hard it is to go to a bar and
Not drink.
not have the liquid courage to get up in front of a microphone because you're emotional. But no, he started going to karaoke nights to one, start doing something that he previously enjoyed. He was like, I miss singing and performing. So let me just find a way that's free because there's generally no cover charge at these bars. And if he's not drinking, he's not spending money. He's just signing up for the karaoke list and going to places where he knows he's going to get priority mic time and performing. So it was a really great, and then he would get people coming up to him afterwards and, offering to buy him drinks, but he would decline. And then that sparked conversation. And now he's got this robust social circle of people he frequents the karaoke bar with. So it's whatever that entry point is for you. Maybe it's professional, maybe it's Facebook support groups. I know I certainly joined a whole bunch of widower support groups on Facebook and social
Right.
media initially
Right.
because I didn't know how to make friends out in public. Um, you bump into someone at the grocery store and you're like, I like your sweater. Do you want to be friends?
Right.
It very much is that playground mentality. But that's how I do it now. I met someone at a networking thing yesterday and complimented her shoes. And then she was like, sit next to me. And then we exchanged numbers and now we're friends on Instagram. And I'm like, okay, let's grab brunch. And so you're going to just develop those organic friendships as they present themselves. But it's finding that initial entry point that helps you get your feet wet in developing authentic
Also,
relationships.
also, and with if comfortability is your initial circumstance, look in, look in your present social circle. There may
Mm,
be people who have experienced issues. If not them, maybe their parents,
mm,
maybe their siblings. And you know, you now have built a relationship of familiar with the
familiarity. Yeah.
with. And they may offer some healthy friend additional friendship. Or they
An
may
opportunity for
direct you. They may say, you know
socialization.
what? My brother went through something similar. You know, maybe you and him should talk and
Yeah.
tell you what he went through. And now you're starting to create friendship based off of what you've gone through, but also there's a point of you're familiar with this person because you're familiar with their sibling or
Seven
you're
degrees of
familiar
Kevin
with
Bacon,
their
as I
family
like to
member.
call it.
You know, and
It's
that
the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon theory,
yeah,
or 6 degrees of separation, but I call it 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon because the reason I say that is because I read a thing, I don't know, probably a good decade ago. Maybe it was something Craig showed me, but it was almost every celebrity can be connected back to Kevin Bacon within 7 people.
wow.
Yeah, go look it up. It's wild because it's like how true it is if you just pick a random celebrity and then you're like, okay, they know this person who knows this person, and eventually you can trace it back to Kevin Bacon. So I call it when you make friends with people who know other people, it's 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. That's what you're doing in your social circle. But this loss is also a good opportunity to evaluate your current circle, not just for
Yes.
those entry points, but to like, okay, what relationships aren't serving me? And I'm not saying like take an axe to the chopping block. I mean, I do a yearly Facebook friend purge list anyway, but that was a thing I did prior to loss. I just don't like to have way too many Facebook friends, and I'm not friends with people generally
Right.
who I haven't met in person or fostered a real relationship with. I don't do those rando Facebook followers or friends just to have them. At least not on my personal page. But it's knowing that your real life beyond social, your real life relationships maybe need an evaluation. And is this relationship still serving me? Am I still serving them? Because if you've evolved and you're not at a place where it's now a reciprocal relationship, and there's temporary, times in a friendship where it's not always 50-50. I guess is what I'm trying to say. In a friendship, there's going to be times when it's 60-40, 80-20, even 95-5. But as long as it counterbalances back the other way, that's okay. It's when you find those relationships that are only ever, 80-20. And
Right.
are you the 20? Are you not bringing enough to the table because you don't have the bandwidth? That's not fair to this person. And if that's how it's going to be in perpetuity, release them. And vice versa. If there's people not coming to the table regularly, okay, well, maybe that person was a season in your life,
Right.
not a
And a part,
reason.
listen, a big part of finding your tribe is being courageous enough to let something go.
That's a great
Because
way of phrasing it. Courageous. I love that.
I mean that's what it comes down to because when you have spent time investing in these relationships prior to your loss, then you assume that 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 relationship is going to be strong. And then you realize that there's a reason behind why it's not as strong as you assumed it would be. And again, and it's not a bad thing. It's
Well, I
your
also think that
opportunity
sometimes relationships just run their course,
to
right?
run their course.
It's not like it ends traumatically or tragically or in a catastrophe. There doesn't always have to be a big blow up or a big, severing of that relationship. Sometimes people will flow in and flow out, and you just have to like
Right.
allow that to happen and know it's not personal when it flows out, because it's very easy for us to take that personally as a triggered, traumatized person. As someone in the widowhood experience, we tend to go, oh my God, I'm broken. I did something wrong. They don't want to be my friend. Or see, I can't have any relationships. Everyone abandons me. Or don't do that to yourself. Allow,
No,
because the universe will remove what's no longer serving you to make space for something else.
organically,
Yeah,
things happen to your advantage, and organically, people will be removed from your life, and that's also an advantage
it's
because
okay to let
it,
that removal
it
happen,
is
that ebb
okay.
and flow.
It allows you to realize that, like you said, some circumstances, some people are seasonal, and they served a time period that you needed,
Yeah,
whether it
there's
was
nothing wrong
before
with
you
that.
were, whether it's before your loss and you guys were friends, whether it's after your loss. Because I met some people after the loss of my wife that I thought I would be genuine friends with, but
Mm.
realized that the two of us, personality wise, we just didn't make it. Although, hey, we both went through things, we both dealt with
But they were
things
a
we
stepping
may
stone,
have,
right? Like you guys
no,
needed each other
right.
to get to
Sometimes,
a certain time
sometimes you just
period and
it
then
does
you depart.
right. Sometimes
And
you just not gonna be
and that's okay. So, but don't go into every relationship going like, oh, this one's not going to last. It's just
right.
allow it to
Don't
be
have
what it
that
is, how it
expectation.
is, let it be organic. A lot of metaphors around grief, especially spousal loss, is that like ocean wave, right? Like sometimes the wave is going to be
Ebbs
really
and
big
flows.
and sometimes it's going to be really small. But what I think that a lot of people fail to understand is that adaptation of that metaphor applies to just about every facet of the widowhood experience. The wave of friends and relationships coming in and out, the wave of emotions and sadness and anger and phases, the wave of self love or self deprecation and maladaptiveness. It's all waves, it's all lunar phases, those ebbs and flows. And you have to get really good at body surfing. You have
Right.
to get really good at just not fighting the current or fighting the wave. Once you stop fighting it and just learn to bob and ride, it gets a little less burdensome. But, I could
You know
talk
what?
about that all day long as well. I
Hey,
think,
hey, this was an awesome conversation. I mean, the one thing I'm gonna say before we head out is people please understand that in order to find your tribe, you don't go looking for your tribe. You simply allow it to happen. And
yes, being
when it
open to
happens,
opportunity.
yes. When it happens, it creates opportunity. Those become the most genuine friendships over time. Also, but you can look at places like going on Facebook. You know, you might
Yeah, I
you
think
might
it's a matter
find
of
that
finding
that-
those inlets, that those
yes,
boat launches. You've got to
if it
not perpetuate isolation and be
don't
open to experiences and be open to releasing on relationships that don't make you feel good or don't that make you feel drained, and just allow, like you said, allow. But if you need that connection beyond a support group, there are lots of ways to do it. So, local community centers, recreation centers, sign up for a dance class or an art class in
do
your
something you do
town,
something that you are not familiar with.
or do something that you love that you've lost connection with and don't feel like you
Right,
have to do it
right,
with someone. Go
right.
into it solo,
So
and you
to
will
look
have
for a
presented
way,
yourself with an
look for a friendship,
opportunity.
look for a commonality
Look for
No,
community, and then friendships will find themselves
exactly.
when you find those, like, reconnect with the things that make you happy. Fill your own cup, and those healthy relationships will present themselves when you start reinvesting in yourself. That's the big takeaway from today.
Well,
So,
Kate, thank
what an
you so much.
incredible conversation, Jay. I'm so
Really was.
excited to continue to do this work with you. And for everybody out there listening, I just want to thank you guys. Head on over to the Exvadio Media Network and check out our previous episodes. That wraps it for this edition of Happily Never After. I'm your host, Kate.
And I'm Jay. So I want to say thank you all for listening. Like Kate said, come to the Exvadio site, listen to a couple of our episodes. Listen, this is an incredible opportunity just for two people to get together and have conversation. It's definitely something where people want to take advantage and listen. So again,
And there's tons of
thank you
other
so much.
great podcasts on that network as well. Just, keep listening to us, but, go check out
Right.
some of the other podcasts out there on the Expadio Media Network and all of your, favorite streaming platforms. Check us out, and we'll catch you guys next time.
All right. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Happily Never After, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode of Happily Never After, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.